The thesis of this video is, does the Story of Seasons franchise have a timeline? The answer is, sort of? Maybe? It's complicated as most timelines are. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's thought about this, specifically because some of the games do 100% have confirmed connections. Now, I'll admit I haven't played every single game in the franchise. I've only played Magical Melody, Another Wonderful Life, DSQ, Tree of Tranquility, Story of Seasons, Pioneers of Olive Town, and the Wonderful Life remake. I am not claiming to be an expert, so I'm sure I'll get some things wrong. But I did make an argument on how Pete and Claire could work in Smash Brothers. Is this video just an excuse to talk about one of my favorite franchises? Maybe. Also, to make this work, there are some games that I'll have to determine to be non-canon. I'll explain that shortly in the meat of the video. But with that disclaimer out of the way, on to the full argument on what could be the timeline. Let's start at the beginning with the original Harvest Moon. 64 takes place sometime after that, as the Bachelorettes are confirmed to be the granddaughters of the original Bachelorettes. But they are also found in Mineral Town. So what gives? Well, as influential and beloved as 64 is, I think Friends of Mineral Town has replaced it in the timeline. This is because you can concretely connect Friends of Mineral Town with other games more easily. Also, as far as I'm aware, they hit similar story beats. As far as those connections, the most obvious one is A Wonderful Life. From my understanding, if you have a GameCube connector, you can connect A Wonderful Life with Friends of Mineral Town. Not to mention, Ruby and Van will show up in Mineral Town. Oh, and just to note, returning characters are going to be playing a big part in my argument here. Now, Sunshine Island takes place after Friends of Mineral Town and A Wonderful Life. We know this because some of our Mineral Town friends return in Sunshine Islands and are confirmed to be married. As they are unmarried until Pete or Claire enter their lives, it must take place around here. Unfortunately, due to how Sunshine Island is an enhanced version of Island of Happiness, we can mark Island of Happiness as non-canon. While we're marking things as non-canon, we have to also assume Tree of Tranquility is non-canon, but Animal Parade is canon instead. I am going to be using Tree of Tranquility as a reference here though, because that's the one I know. I believe Animal Parade takes place shortly before our trio of titles. This is because of the presence of Gray and Ellie. Ellie is the main reason why I believe this takes place at this point. She is working at Town Hall in Tree of Tranquility, not as a nurse. As medical degrees are tough to get, perhaps we can assume that she is working here in Town Hall to pay for her education towards her nursing degree. Just ignore the fact that the children on Waffle Island grow up. I'm sure those two don't hang around for 10 years. That would be awkward. To recap, we have Harvest Moon to Animal Parade to A Wonderful Life in Friends of Mineral Town to Sunshine Islands. After that group of games, there is a game that is canonically confirmed to take place. DS. Harvest Moon DS and DSQ are confirmed to take place 100 years after A Wonderful Life, both in-game and out. The biggest example being that, from what I've been told, if you connect A Wonderful Life with Friends of Mineral Town and then have that specific copy of Friends of Mineral Town in the Game Boy Advance slot in the Nintendo DS, then the large gravestone will have your player character's name on it from A Wonderful Life. Ditto for the girl versions. While all the characters in Forget-Me-Not Valley look the same as A Wonderful Life, they are technically different characters, which is why their Japanese names are different. This is Mumu, and this is Mu. This is Kai, and this is Ein. This is Gustava, and this is Gusta. Totally different people. Why do they look and act the same as their counterparts from 100 years ago? I have no idea. The games never explain it. Maybe the nature sprites were just being cheeky or something? There are 100 of them in DS after all. There's bound to be a bad apple or two. Like Violetto! Why are you hanging around the hot springs? Why do I need to use it 200 times for you to appear? What are you up to, you deviant? Now, here's a harder one to place due to the returning characters, and that is Magical Melody. Now, we could use the same logic as DS does, but it's complicated. The Bachelorettes from the original Harvest Moon return. Likewise, so does Nami. While not outright stated, in the secret ending where the player marries Jamie, Nami implies that she's going to go to Forget-Me-Not Valley. That should be clean cut, right? It takes place around Animal Parade, right? But then why are the original bachelorettes here? While I'd like to say it takes place around Animal Parade, there is also a strong argument that it straight up replaces the original Harvest Moon in this timeline. I've even seen some people say that Magical Melody is a reimagining of the original Harvest Moon. Not just because of the bachelorettes, but also Adam. Adam and Pete look extremely similar, almost identical in fact. Is it possible that they're related? We know Pete is the main man in Mineral Town, where the bachelorettes are the granddaughters of the originals. There is an argument to be made that the main character in the original Harvest Moon was retconned to be Adam, hence why Pete and Adam look so similar. If we then apply the logic that the Mineral Town bachelorettes are the granddaughters of the original bachelorettes, then Pete could have been retconned into being Adam's grandson. In that case, the one and only Forget-Me-Not Valley character could be the grandmother of the Nami we all know? The Nami, or Nasuka, 100 years later, arguably uses that logic. When it comes to Magical Melody, it really could be either a replacement for the original Harvest Moon or taking place at the same time as Animal Parade. The bias in me wants to put it at the same time as Animal Parade due to Nami's actions, but it's hard to just ignore the original bachelorettes. They even have rivals in this game, so we know who the grandpas are. I've read that in Mineral Town, Gray's grandfather is Saibara, but Gray has such a strong resemblance to Blue, it's hard to ignore. Therefore, despite what my heart is telling me, and despite how I'm absolutely positive I'm going to be told I'm wrong about this, I am replacing the original Harvest Moon with Magical Melody, but I'm putting an asterisk here because of everything I just discussed. Oh, and I'm just going to ignore the 3 Game Boy games in this case because from what I can tell, those 3 are also competing for the slot of the original Harvest Moon, a slot I just gave to Magical Melody. This makes our current timeline Magical Melody to Animal Parade to A Wonderful Life in Friends of Mineral Town to Sunshine Islands to DS. But now we get into the ones that are much harder to pin down, especially for me because I haven't played most of these ones. I'm going to try to connect them with each other before figuring out where or if I can slot them into our current timeline. The major connections here are, once again, the returning characters, so it's pinning down their timelines to determine the order of the games. There are also no enhanced versions of these games, so nothing here is going to replace other titles either. I'll lay them out here before getting to the nitty-gritty of it. From Island of Happiness, Alyssa returns in The Tale of Two Towns. From Grand Bazaar, Dirk returns in The Tale of Two Towns, and Amir returns in A New Beginning. From The Tale of Two Towns, Cam and Reina return in Story of Seasons. From Story of Seasons, Wolfio returns in Trio of Towns. And lastly, as DLC, in Pioneers of Olive Town, we see the return of Neil and Felicity from A New Beginning, Rhaegar and Iris from Story of Seasons, and Ludus and Lizette from Trio of Towns, among others from these 3 titles, but we'll focus on the marriage candidates, just cause that's easier for me. Firstly, I want to touch on Wolfio from Trio of Towns, because he's the easiest to pin down. Wolfio is a bachelor in Trio of Towns, but not in Story of Seasons. Since Wolfio can marry and have children in his second appearance, but not his first, I think it's fair to say that Trio of Towns takes place after Story of Seasons. Next, I want to believe Pioneers of Olive Town takes place before Story of Seasons. This is because of Rhaegar. Rhaegar is a bit of a workaholic, so it's very strange that he'd leave his restaurant. In Pioneers of Olive Town, he says, "Let's just say a lot is going on." He continues saying that the restaurant is being remodeled, but knowing his family history, it's more likely related to his mother and grandfather. If we assume that his grandfather is still alive at this point, then that'd allow Rhaegar to leave the restaurant to travel. So I want to make the order Pioneers of Olive Town to Story of Seasons to Trio of Towns. But Rhaegar isn't the only one returning in Pioneers of Olive Town. It's been locked in that Trio of Towns takes place after Story of Seasons. So does Ludus and Lizette showing up from Trio of Towns put a wrench in where I've placed Pioneers of Olive Town? From what I read, yes it does. Specifically because of Ludus and Tigray. From my understanding, in Pioneers of Olive Town, Tigray is Ludus' apprentice. However, in Trio of Towns, Tigray just looks up to Ludus. It doesn't appear as though they have a mentor-apprentice relationship yet. This brings us to a conundrum. It's out of character for Rhaegar to be away from his restaurant in this capacity, but the relationship between Ludus and Tigray has advanced farther than it is in Trio of Towns. This means that a decision needs to be made as to whether Pioneers of Olive Town takes place before Story of Seasons or after Trio of Towns. Unfortunately, just because I want to put Pioneers of Olive Town before Story of Seasons to keep Rhaegar consistent, plot-wise it makes more sense to place it after Trio of Towns. Despite it being out of character for him, we do just have to take Rhaegar at face value here and say he did leave Oak Tree Town due to renovations at the restaurant. The evidence from the progression of Ludus and Tigray's relationship is too strong to ignore. As boring as it is, here we go in release order of these three games: Story of Seasons to Trio of Towns to Pioneers of Olive Town. The last game with Grand Returns in Pioneers of Olive Town are the characters from A New Beginning, but in order to place that one, we need to work backwards to determine the relationship with Grand Bazaar due to Amir's return. We might as well tackle the Tale of Two Towns at the same time because Dirk returns in that one. I believe it is fair to say that A New Beginning takes place before Grand Bazaar, and thanks to Amir, it actually is really simple to place, though there are a bit of leaps in logic here, I'll admit. In A New Beginning, Amir appears with his butler, who is absent in Grand Bazaar. Furthermore, in A New Beginning, Amir leaves every fall to take care of things in his home country. From what I can tell, he does not do this in Grand Bazaar. He does leave Zephyrtown to celebrate his father's birthday, and perhaps he is lying about that, since in Grand Bazaar he is trying to keep his identity as a prince a secret, but the absence of his butler is the trick here. Other than not being created yet, is there an in-universe reason why Sanjay would accompany Amir to Echo Village and not Zephyrtown? Again, I haven't played either of these titles, so this is just speculation based on what I've read about Amir in his home country. Amir appears to be more open that he is a prince in A New Beginning since he is secretive in Zephyrtown. His travels to Echo Village may be the very first time he's traveled outside his home country. Hypothetically speaking, as he was responsible enough to return home for his royal duties, his father allowed him to continue traveling without the need of an escort, therefore allowing Amir to travel to Zephyrtown alone. He obviously didn't run away to either place since he returns to his home country for his royal duties every year. With that, I am very comfortable placing A New Beginning before Grand Bazaar. So what about Dirk showing up in the Tale of Two Towns? That's actually really easy. From what I read, Dirk has grown older since Grand Bazaar, so obviously the Tale of Two Towns has to take place afterwards. To recap, we have now established A New Beginning takes place before Grand Bazaar and the Tale of Two Towns takes place after Grand Bazaar. Let's circle back to Pioneers of Olive Town now, because Neil and Felicity from A New Beginning return. Something that's going to be rather difficult because A New Beginning is at the beginning point of the last stream I just spoke of, whereas Pioneers of Olive Town is at the end of its trio. Unless, of course, A New Beginning takes place after Pioneers of Olive Town, but do Neil and Felicity's stories support this? Unfortunately, no. It's not that easy. Neil alone counters this argument. At the start of A New Beginning, he is moving to Echo Village. Then, in Pioneers of Olive Town, he arrives in Olive Town from Echo Village, which means we cannot go the easy route of just slotting A New Beginning, Grand Bazaar, and A Tale of Two Towns after Pioneers of Olive Town. The next obvious spot is saying that since Story of Seasons, Trio Towns, and Pioneers of Olive Town were in release order, A New Beginning should be before Story of Seasons. But then we run into the roadblock of, does Grand Bazaar and the Tale of Two Towns take place at the same time as any of those other three games? We do not know how much time passes between A New Beginning and Grand Bazaar after all. We do know Cam and Reyna from the Tale of Two Towns return in Story of Seasons, but just like how we ignored Nami's return in Magical Melody, I think we might need to ignore the return of Cam and Reyna as well, which is really awkward and unfortunate, but that is because of Pioneers of Olive Town. We know A New Beginning takes place before Pioneers of Olive Town. For A New Beginning to take place before Story of Seasons, Grand Bazaar and the Tale of Two Towns would need to take place at the same time as Story of Seasons and Trio of Towns so that Neil doesn't age too much. However, I think a fair spot is to place a new beginning before Pioneers of Olive Town. Then I believe that Grand Bazaar either happens at the same time as Pioneers of Olive Town or afterwards. And of course, the Tale of Two Towns is locked into being after Grand Bazaar. Just to make things easier, I'm going to say that Grand Bazaar and Pioneers of Olive Town are not happening at the same time, and I'll explain why momentarily. Before moving forward, let's recap what we have. Currently, we have two time streams. One that uses Mineral Town as the main pillar of the argument, and one that has very loose connections that are just barely hanging together. In the Mineral Town line, we have Magical Melody to Animal Parade to A Wonderful Life and Friends of Mineral Town to Sunshine Islands to DS. In the post-Mineral Town line, we have Story of Seasons to Trio of Towns to A New Beginning to Pioneers of Olive Town to Grand Bazaar to The Tale of Two Towns. That means it is now time to connect them together to create our final timeline. The final key to connecting these two together is Alyssa! For Alyssa, we can apply the same logic to her that we did for Livio. In both Island of Happiness and Sunshine Islands, Alyssa is not a bachelorette. However, she is in The Tale of Two Towns. As she is too dedicated to her religion in her first appearance but can have children in her second, it makes the most sense to have The Tale of Two Towns take place after Sunshine Islands. Since Grand Bazaar is locked with The Tale of Two Towns, this means these two games happen after Sunshine Islands but before DS. Alright, so that's all well and good, but what about our remaining four? They all need to take place together, but Grand Bazaar cannot be too far away from A New Beginning. We also have no other returning characters to rely on, so we can only rely on the evidence that is taking us this far. While Friends of Mineral Town cannot be too far away from Sunshine Islands, I think we can take the liberty to give a little wiggle room. In that wiggle room, we'll slot in A New Beginning. Then, by default, Pioneers of Olive Town takes place at the same time as Sunshine Islands, similar to how Friends of Mineral Town and A Wonderful Life take place around the same time. Two more left to place. What's more, these two are locked in together. They also cannot be too far away from Pioneers of Olive Town. Does this mean they take place at the same time as other games? Maybe. We don't have any evidence for or against that, but I think I may know a way to do both. Remember how I said to just ignore the children in Tree of Tranquility and Animal Parade? How Gray and Ellie wouldn't have been there for that long since they need to appear later? Perhaps we can take a little wiggle room there. What if Story of Seasons takes place around or after Animal Parade, which would then mean that Trio of Towns takes place around the Wonderful Life and Mineral Town duo, or before? Due to the returning characters between the Wii games and Mineral Town, I think we can make that duo of games into a trio. Pun not intended. All of this is why Grand Bazaar in The Tale of Two Towns needs to take place after Pioneers of Olive Town in Sunshine Islands. If Grand Bazaar in The Tale of Two Towns are before Story of Seasons, then too much time passes between Animal Parade and Friends of Mineral Town. Similarly, Grand Bazaar in The Tale of Two Towns needs to be after Pioneers of Olive Town and Sunshine Islands, or else there's too much time that passes between Friends of Mineral Town and Sunshine Islands. This passage of time is why I believe the reappearance of Cam and Reina in Story of Seasons unfortunately needs to be ignored, otherwise it messes with the original timeline we established too much, and that one is way more tightly knit than what I put together for the post-Mineral Town timeline. I suppose you can make an argument that Grand Bazaar and The Tale of Two Towns take place between Magical Melody and Animal Parade so that the Tale of Two Towns characters can show up in Story of Seasons. However, I already made the argument as to why Grand Bazaar comes after A New Beginning, which has been placed way later. So with that, everything has been placed. Hi! Sorry, this is an unscripted interruption from the edit because I realized that there are 6 games I didn't actually mention. I didn't forget about them, but I didn't mention Back to Nature for Girl, or Boy and Girl because they take place at the same time as Mineral Town, like they're fighting for the same slot. And of course, like I said, Friends of Mineral Town is kind of the crux of this argument here. Why did I mention the Game Boy games in my script, but not the Back to Nature games? That I don't know. You'd have to ask past me. But that's the reason I didn't mention them. As for Save the Homeland, Hero of Leaf Valley, and Innocent Life, I didn't mention them because I don't know if they're canon. I haven't played any of them, and I'm getting conflicting information. But while I was editing, I thought, if I don't mention them, I'll get yelled at for forgetting, which I didn't. So, Hero of Leaf Valley is the enhanced version of Save the Homeland, so we prioritize Hero of Leaf Valley, and Hero of Leaf Valley would go before Magical Melody. This is because the bachelorettes from Hero of Leaf Valley return in Magical Melody. Additionally, there are characters in Hero of Leaf Valley such as Bob or Lewis who cannot marry in Hero of Leaf Valley. However, they are bachelors and marry and have children in Magical Melody. So save the homelands at the beginning. And Innocent Life obviously takes place after DS because it is a futuristic Harvest Moon. So it takes place in the future. So yeah, Hero of Leaf Valley at the beginning and Innocent Life at the end. So please don't yell at me for not mentioning these games, because I did remember. Feel free to yell at me for getting this timeline wrong. So let's go over our final Story of Seasons timeline. At the very beginning, we have Magical Melody. After Adam or Amanda's story, everyone in Flowerbud Village has grown to have grandchildren. We see the first glimpses of said grandchildren in Animal Parade. Far from there, a Story of Seasons is taking part. After the grandchildren return to Mineral Town, we see 3 stories taking place. Friends of Mineral Town, A Wonderful Life, and Trio of Towns. Afterwards, we witness a new beginning. Then 2 stories take place, one involving the pioneers of Olive Town, and the other taking place on the Sunshine Islands. Then we visit a grand bazaar. After a couple of years, we then hear the tale of 2 towns. Finally, 100 years later, comes the story of the DS. To answer my question from the beginning, does Story of Seasons have a timeline? The answer is a resounding yes. Is this 100% correct? Honestly, probably not. Like I keep saying, even though this is one of my favorite franchises, I haven't played all the games. A lot of what I was going off of was secondhand information. I also had to make some leaps in logic and ignore certain facts to make a timeline that I'm personally satisfied with. But at the very least, I think, or at least hope, it's close to being correct. Due to that, I'd love it if this could possibly be used as a jumping off point so that those who are much more knowledgeable about the franchise than me can create an undisputed, definitive timeline. Was this video just an excuse to talk about Story of Seasons? Yes.